Hi, folks. Thanks for coming to my session. We're going to be talking about an interesting case that I stumbled upon researching subject material for a book that I have in development. And you can stay tuned about that. But it was really fascinating. It really is, a case of a big ambitious company trying to do everything that they knew should work and having it blow up in their faces. And I think it's a fascinating example of what not to do when you're going down this path of platform engineering and building out internal platforms or public platforms or really any large scale initiative. So what we're talking about is Predix, which is a platform as a service for the industrial internet. So we're talking sensors, IoT, factory equipment, and there's a real opportunity for this when it came out. It was built on top of Cloud Foundry using the latest technology. It was going to be a big deal, but it didn't quite work out. So what they actually wanted to do was they were working from kind of the best thinking in Silicon Valley at the time. They brought in Eric Ries, who's the writer of the Lean Startup, with experience in IM View and sort of like rapid delivery and deployment and all kinds of good technical practices, experimentation, pivoting, and they developed their own system, which I also think is a great idea, um, called FastWorks, which is essentially like lean, classical lean plus lean startup. And there's different moving pieces you could look into there. They wanted to build out this infrastructure as a service and platform as a service offering. And they wanted to build out data centers to support that. And this was 2014. They were thinking AWS is well off the ground on this at this point. Data centers not quite lean startup material. That's a big expense, not quite something that you want to experiment with. But let's say they're huge. Maybe they could pull it off. They wanted things like on-demand infrastructure, pipelines, application scaffolds, templates, things like this. Um, and this is all to facilitate Internet of Things development, right? So how do you develop Internet of Things applications, hardware, networking, all of the components that it takes to run the digital and physical world mixed together? And they had all kinds of services in mind. Everything that you'd want to stand up a new sensor, a new product, a digital twin in a factory, monitor performance, check for signals of maintenance needs, all kinds of stuff, right? IoT, gigantic space, huge opportunity. They wanted analytics across all the data that was being published from their factories, from their customers' factories, from their experiments, from their prototypes, from sensors, beacons, all kinds of stuff. Crunch all that together, make it available to people, let people build on top of it, have things like application performance management, alerting, case management, search, you name it. And also a marketplace. So they wanted to sell these offerings internally, so treating their internal developers as customers, giving them access to a catalog of offerings. But then they also wanted to resell this, and they wanted to resell this to the public, but also through partners, through like white label offerings, right, where they would pay to resell Predix to their customers. And so the first thing to remember when you're building anything is that building it might be the worst decision you could make. There's many steps that you need to walk through before you build anything. Because chances are, when you build something, nobody's going to care, right? Nobody inherently cares. Nobody needs to care. So it's good to assume that they won't, unless you do everything that you can to make sure that they do. And it's also good to remember that most of these digital transformation efforts, most of the projects and the money and the effort that go into digital transformation, adapting to digital ways of working, digital environments, platforms, they fail because this is largely unknown territory. Most people haven't done it before. A company like GE, very physical, very anchored and rooted in the real world, in traditional manufacturing, in factories, and very limited exposure to the digital world. So this is a very new environment for them, and odds are low that they're going to get it right the first time. So let's look at what happened. What was the actual timeline? So this is very rough. If you're interested in this, reach out to me because I've got a lot more detail. But essentially, in 2015, they publicly announced this partnership that they were building. Um, DevOps Enterprise Summit. This is the first time I heard about it, and they were on stage with Chef talking about building out a platform, the challenges, the learning that they've collected, which is great. That's a solid start. I think learning in public is an excellent way to communicate what's happening, but also to hold yourself accountable to learning and to failing and to communicating what's happening, because that's a lot of what is necessary to get these things to catch on and to build and grow and actually get out the door, right? In 2016, GE is very confident in this initiative. They are predicting $15 billion of revenue by 2020. So let's skip ahead to 2020 and see what happens. In 2020, GE is actually doing $1 billion of revenue instead of 15. And they've also spent more than $7 billion on this effort. Lots of spending internally on consultants, on partners, marketing. So, very costly effort here and not necessarily what you'd call a success. And now in 2022, if you look at the IoT marketplace that they were set to dominate, there's 25 IoT cloud platform vendors that I could find. There's probably more than that, but this was a market that GE could have owned. They could have nailed this. They could have actually captured that market and dominated it, much the same way that Amazon dominated the early days of the cloud by being the first to really have a lot of the advanced capabilities. So, what are the things that they did that should have worked? What are the things that seemed like a great idea? And some of the things that even, they pulled off, but weren't quite aimed in the right direction. First thing that I noticed was vision. Like they had this big opportunity. They communicated what they wanted to do. A cloud for the industrial internet is a fantastic offering. There's clearly a market there. Whether or not the market was ready for a self-service platform, who knows? But I think the main challenge with that is that when you have a goal, it really has to align with where you've been and where you're headed. And I think with GE, digital was seen as this silo in the business, not a substrate, not something that was underneath everything that was happening in GE, right? They treated it as its own thing, had a digital division. And so it really wasn't something that they acknowledged culturally or that they sort of lived and breathed. And, they had, as with any company, you have your steady state, like what you're doing on a regular basis, and then the thing that you're trying to do next. And it's really hard to do that next thing if you can't align it with the thing that you're doing right now, right? If I want to lose weight, but I have a ritual of eating a cheeseburger and a milkshake every day for lunch, guess what? Like, what are my odds of success? So I think setting goals is fantastic. Vision is extremely valuable, totally critical, but it's got to line up with your past and what you're doing right now, or else, it's just kind of a pipe dream. And you might actually have nobody believe that, you're capable of it. Investment. They put a lot of money and talent into this. They hired 14,000 developers. But you can't just throw money at problems, right? You can't just hire a bunch of people and hope that they come together and work as a team. under a vision that might not align with the rest of the organization, right? I mean, they really went heavy into this Silicon Valley mindset and set of practices. But they come out of GE, which was like heavy traditional lean, heavy manufacturing, heavy project-based execution, big bets, lots of spending. And so, there's kind of a conflict there, right? They built out this gigantic uh, headquarters in San Ramon, which is kind of an area of Silicon Valley that's not quite close enough to San Francisco to make those developers happy. So I heard from interviews that, it wasn't really a great call for this giant, shiny office to be just a little bit further from the city than all the talent that they wanted to keep happy and recruit. They had a lot of support, so they hired excellent consulting teams to help with this. They had Stark and Wayne, they had New Context, Pivotal, Chef, many of the best involved. But I think what wasn't very clear to me when I had conversations is whether they were building internal capabilities, right? I mean, you can bring in folks from the outside, but eventually they have to go away and you have to start pulling the weight, right? You have to internalize something, especially when it comes to digital and platforms. So, what were they missing? What were the things that went wrong? You can't fill of dreams. You can't just build something, especially when you're saying that you're going to follow the lean startup methodology, right? I mean, you've got to build enough to learn and then pivot, right? Adjust based on the feedback that you're getting. You've got to bring people in. You have to make sure that you communicate that vision and make sure that everybody is following the same map. You've got to focus. So, inside of this story, I saw many different dichotomies. I saw folks who were gunning for efficiency and saving costs, and then other folks who were trying to tackle this brand new market and grow. There was an internal effort, so building tools for GE internally, and then there was this public offering that was coming together. And those are very different customer bases, right? Different needs, different marketing. And then are you trying to boil the ocean or follow lean startup? And I think it looked like boil the ocean from a lot of folks that I talked to. They were trying to do a lot, and that introduces a lot of risk. So capability, I mentioned, this idea that digital could be a silo in your organization. It really is impossible, right? Digital is electricity, right? You can't have an electricity department in your organization. Electricity has to be everywhere. And the same is true for digital. The same is true for cloud. And you can't copy and paste from other organizations, right? You need to develop, you have to sort of like, even if you're going to fake it until you make it, you've got to believe that, you're destined to become this new version of yourself. And that could be, building out a new platform, doing things a different way, adopting new ways of working, being more open and collaborative. So speaking of collaboration, I think collaboration is what I would have liked to see in this case that I didn't see a lot of. I heard a lot of stories of silos, folks in sales who didn't know what was going on, folks in one part of the development process who didn't know what the other developers were doing. And so outcome mapping is something that I like to walk through with people. It talks about outcomes. We're looking at what do we want, right? We start from a target, and then we look at why is that valuable, right? To make it real for people, to give it context, to bring everybody in and help them understand this is why this is important, why we're doing this. Then we look at obstacles. We look at how could this go wrong? What are the things that we're going to have to surpass in order to make this work? And we also look at investigation. So what are we going to do about obstacles? What are we going to do about the outcome? How are we going to learn just enough to make the right decisions? And so mapping this out, online, I use Mural for this. You can use any number of online tools for this. Any video conference is very remote friendly, of course. And it really just helps bring folks onto the same page and helps everybody, uh, share the same perspective before they start going off in their own direction. The next thing, value stream mapping. So let's look at how everything is happening in the organization today. If we're building a platform, how do we do all the things that we want to do automatically or, with a digital platform? And so walking through the value stream map and building out each step and what each step looks like, how long it takes, and how long we're waiting between all those activities really gives us an ability to understand where we can focus or where we should focus. So with something like a value stream map, you're going to find out where most of your time is being spent. And you can find out all kinds of information. You can layer it on top of the skeleton of the value stream map. Each activity in sequence, everything it takes to build something and get it out the door. So this is another really valuable way of getting everybody on the same page and getting everybody to understand, here's what we're dealing with, here's what we're trying to do. The last one that I want to suggest is Wardley mapping, right? Wardley mapping is great for showing folks or building out collaboratively with people what the ecosystem looks like. What does the landscape look like? What is our environment? What are the things that we can move in order to bring them closer to automation or bring them closer to customers, right? You've got multiple dimensions here. You can build out this map and show folks, in order to move this from something that we're constantly spending manual effort on because it's super customized, if we change the way that it operates, we can move it closer to commodification. We could even transfer it to another tool, right? We don't have to boil the ocean. Let's build the things that differentiate us and that play to our capabilities, and we can outsource the rest because someone else is going to do that better. So when you're talking about a platform, I would suggest look at what you have to work with and really think hard about what you want to spend your time and energy on developing in-house, right? You can get a long way by using open source or an off-the-shelf tool that's going to provide that dev platform that gets you out of the shared services game and gives you a new capability that's allowing you to focus on what's really going to make a difference, which is your differentiated products and services. So, quick recap here. I like to think about things in three lenses: value, clarity, and flow. And I think that if we look at this case and we look at value, you want to make sure that you're aligning to the business, you're aligning to customers, you're aligning to employees. You want to communicate that vision and understand, what's going to make this seem valuable to everybody who's involved. And you want to make sure that you don't have conflicting incentives, right? Are people pulling in different directions? Because that's going to really hamper your progress. Clarity for me is all about communication and coming together, bringing people's perspectives into alignment. What do you see? Let me tell you what I see, and we can come to a common understanding. That's why I love mapping so much. And you really need to be mapping because you need to chart your own course, right? Your environment is different than Spotify's environment or Netflix's environment. And so you can't copy and paste from them. You've got to build your own view of the landscape. And then flow really is how it all happens, right? Flow is about understanding your workflow, understanding what you want your workflow to look like, processing feedback. So getting things out and getting feedback about how they're working and performing. And then using classic patterns to process information and make decisions. So there's a lot of information out there around classical techniques that I think are fantastic for this. So if you're interested in this and you're interested more in clarity, value, and flow and finding out more about value streams and how value streams and platforms come together to be really powerful delivery mechanisms in your organization, I've got a new video podcast coming out with my co-author Andrew Davis, and we've got a website at inside-out.work that we would love to see you at. So thanks for joining me. I hope to see you at the rest of the conference.